Okay, so welcome today. We are having a conversation around unschooling and self-directed education. We each come from different perspectives on that, and I'm eager to hear my guests today and what their perspectives are. So I will start off with asking us to just go around, starting with the new people here today, and say what drew you to this conversation and what you hope to get out of it today. So if I could put someone on the spot, Steve showed up first, so I'm going to ask him if he would kick us off.
Yeah, lovely to be here, everyone. I listened to the first 45 minutes or so of last week's call during the week, and then I had to go to bed because it was really late. But I think I consider ourselves to be very lucky as a family, in that when Mei Ling, my wife, was expecting Vanessa, our oldest child, somebody gave us a copy of a book called The Continuum Concept, which some of you know, because that was the book that happened to be up in my mind when I was asked for a book at the start of this thing. And that shifted everything for me very quickly. I think Mei Ling, as so often as the prospective mum, was already kind of thinking about what was gonna happen and what paths we were going to take and so on. And this book, the idea that your child was born with an idea of what they wanted to do, and that there wasn't this point where they went from being baby to human, but that they would come out human, was amazing. And that still, that really shocked me. It really shocked me when Vanessa was born, to have this kind of like, oh, you're a person. It's amazing. And then we fell into an attachment parenting group, and there was discussion in that about homemade. And by the time you've been attachment parenting for 4 years and responding to your child's needs by saying yes as much as possible and not having arbitrary no's on stuff, it doesn't feel like you could stop. You can't turn that tap off and go, yeah, I've done that now, see you when you're 18, or what's left of you. So we were in from the get-go, and I feel very, very lucky to have discussed it, because in all the conversations I have with people who send their children to school, is that even legal? That's the first question, is how? And in the UK currently, it's very loose. The law states very simply that it is the duty of parents to educate their children and provide them with a full-time, efficient education that is suited to the needs of the child. And that's pretty much it as far as the actual law is concerned. And there are interested parties who are trying to make it more complicated than that. But if you don't send your children to school, then the government have no interest in it. If you've sent your child to school and then you take them out of school, they have a kind of duty of care to make sure that you're still okay. But Vanessa never went, so nobody knows about us. And that means that you can just bugger off to India for 2 years and nobody bats an eyelid. And we're very much at the unschooly end, probably the radical unschooly end of unschooly, where we're quite free reign in lots of ways. That's me.
Thank you, Steve. So I'm gonna
Bit long,
ask.
sorry.
No, not at all. What I'm gonna ask is just to kind of, if you wind up having questions for each other, we could put them in maybe the chat to kind of round again, because sometimes I think I found last time that the next person might answer a question that Steve raised because they're building upon what he said or connecting to it. So Maria or Angel, Maria go next?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure. Well, thank you for having us. I mean, I'm sorry if it's too loud here. This is just a great opportunity because I became passionate about this unschooling or whatever learning processes there are after I became a mother. And that's the funny thing, is that there is no, I think in general, personally in my culture, I come from Venezuela and I'm an immigrant here in Portugal. And in my culture, there's no real teaching values in terms of the ways you can learn in the future, besides going to school, going to university, and do all this these boxes, these society boxes that we have, right? So I wish I had that opportunity to have a different perspective from an early age, right? So that's how I want my kid to be raised. I want to give him information. I love the thread of the unschooling. It was just so interesting to me because part of me says, go ahead, do it, jump. As you were telling your story, I was amazed by your story, Nicole. And I was just so passionate. I have that voice within me that says, do it, go for it. But then at the end of the day, it's not only me. It's the kid. He's a person, but it has me and it has his dad, and he has another background, another culture behind it. Maybe his perspective of life it might be similar in some stuff to mine, but in others it's different. So it's that process. And in the meantime, he's going to school, and then I find that his emotions are not being completely, I don't want to say fulfilled, because that's our job to teach our kids how to like calibrate that emotion. But at the end of the day, they go to school, and the only thing they basically do, and I'm talking about public school. I'm not talking about Montessori or other type of education schools. I'm talking about the regular public in general. I find that the most important thing is just to go to the kid, teach him to be unattached to the parents for an hour to another hour, to learn how to eat whatever food they provide, not the food that they actually can find different nutrients of. I don't know if I'm making sense here, but it's just that idea of being like beyond the academic of like putting dots together. You're a good kid, bad kid. You shouldn't be doing that. You should be ashamed. I don't want that for my kid. So I'm in that phase between like I should jump and do it, but I have to learn as well a little bit more. I don't want to do anything that harms my child, but that includes leaving him in a school where it doesn't necessarily meet my expectations for, not, I don't want to say his life, but his learning process. And I don't know if I'm just making sense here, but it's just it comes to my mind as a very important issue, because at the end of the day, they're going to be the adults, they're going to run this world, right? I don't know if I took too long. I'm sorry.
No one's taking too long, and you're making sense of everything that's in your head. So you're doing, and it is coming across. At least I'm seeing nodding heads. So trust
Yeah.
that. And I'm
Well,
glad the
thank you.
Howards got here
Yeah.
too. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And
No, thank you.
so just to brief, the Howards look like they are here, and I don't see any video or picture, but I can hear, right? Can you speak up?
Yeah.
Good. No, I knew we could hear you, so I'm glad to hear you. I just want to tell you what we're in the middle of. So basically, we are recording. So I had asked for consent, and I had said that in the thread. So just want to make sure that you're cool with that, because there'll be different audio threads for the different for even you speaking up today. And if anybody wants that for any of their projects here in the podcasting workshop, I'd be happy to share that with you. We just heard from already Steve and Maria, but you can listen back to that. And I'm going to ask Angel to speak up in the question, and you'll be next, because the first video covered a lot of me, Louise, Sophie, and Cassandra, is to hear from you what drew you to this conversation and what you hope to get out of it today. And so, Angel, if I could turn it over to you, I'm going to go shut my door too. So.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn on my camera also. Hello, everyone. I don't know if you can hear me, if you can see me. Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah. Okay. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. Also, I'm coming for a little bit different perspective from Maria and Steve, because I'm not a parent still, but I have a lot of children on my own, because I'm a teacher and I'm teaching kids from currently it's from 5th to 12th grade in the Bulgarian system, which is from 12 years old to 19 years old, so more or less. So this is like the middle school and the high school part of the educational system. And actually, I'm coming from a background of trainer, educator, not in schools, but to grown-ups. And I moved to schools because I really love and enjoy working with kids. I have some background with different projects in after-school activities, like learning how to code and programming, because I'm also a software engineer. And actually, why I wanted to go in schools is because I wanted to see how the system works and how teachers are handling all the school activities, because I really think that there are different ways to change, not exactly the system, and I don't think that the system needs to be changed, but I really think that with different activities inside schools and inside the traditional system, even in Bulgaria, where a lot of people are saying that it's a lot more conservative than other, let's say, European countries or even other countries throughout the world. Still, I see sparks of really good ways of working with children and giving them what they need and what they want. And also, I want to pose here that I really think that there are different kind of systems that might work with different kids. And I've seen this a lot, and for me, this is this can be one of the crucial points here that I want to make, is that some kids might be better off with bigger groups and working with them, and other might be better off working alone and constantly working on their own. But more or less, it's always a compromise of having one thing or another, and it should always be considered like this. And for me, as a standpoint of a teacher, I really want to help and to change the educational system from the grounds up in order to make it better for more kids and make it more diverse. Because for me, this is the most important part. If there are different kind of propositions in front of parents for their kids, they might be able to choose the best for their kid. And how do they learn what is the best for their kid is when they try different kind of activities, and the kids try different kind of activities, and then they see what's the best. And for me, that's the most important part. From the beginning of this year, actually from the beginning of last year, I started a personal project with two of my friends. We are making an educational website which is trying to help kids have a better understanding of the world around them, let's say like this. It's connected to the lessons in school, but it's also connected to professional orientation or what they might be good at when they grow up. And also from the beginning of this year, we started a podcast with teachers. That's why I'm part of the podcasting workshop. And actually it's whole in Bulgarian, but now during the summertime, I want to have some episodes in English. And yesterday we aired the first English speaking episode. So I'm going to share the link with you, and I hope that you can hear and also give back some feedback on this, because for me that's going to be very, very positive. Actually, the questions that were posed there with Niels, as you can see, are the same questions that we're asking in Bulgarian, the Bulgarian teachers. Niels is actually not a teacher, but he is part of the educational system in Netherlands, and also he has been teaching teachers in Nepal. So it's very, very interesting point of view from his side. And the most important part, and that is the name of the episode, is that age is not a valid variable for how to set a class. And that's one thing that I really want to delve on furthermore, because that's from yesterday, as you know, on the episode. And that's where I want to end, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. And I will say that I'm sure Louise will probably have some stuff to talk to you about, because if you didn't watch the first round, Louise was inside of schools where in the country of Germany it is illegal for homeschooling. So this is more focused on the path outside, or the discussions of. But we definitely, I worked in a school for 5 years and I joined from the business world to see what it was like from the inside. And, you know, one of the things I didn't say at the beginning of this conversation that's worth just reiterating is that we need to have these dialogues for people who are interested in sort of making change from the outside, because I think you can learn something from what we're like talking about and thinking about, and age is definitely not a variable. You know, that I love that point, but it is about not what the space I'm trying to create is not about voicing frustrations necessarily of what is, but more focused on what could be. So bringing forth the story of what is, if it's relevant to what we're trying to decide. So when I listened to Maria, you know, she talked a lot about like, this is what is, but you could see that she really is grappling with what could be. And that's the sort of more interesting space for me and what I'm trying to create dialogue around. So definitely thank you for sharing all of that. Next up, if we could hear from the Howards, and then you know, we'll go around to the rest of us who were here last time to just kind of give another, you know, not to re-talk about what we talked about before necessarily, because if people want to go back, they can listen to that, but just to kind of add to what we're hearing today, build upon the conversation, okay?
Well, thank you for putting this together. First of all, I apologize that we were late to it and we cannot get our video started. So I appreciate patience with that.
I thought we saw your video temporarily for a moment. Did anybody else notice that? I don't know.
Probably.
But yeah.
We're just having a glitch on the computer, and it would require restarting and things. We're just going to roll with it.
We are good. We'd love to see your faces, but I'm glad we hear your voices. So thank you.
Well, we're very excited that there is this community here. We started, or we're in the podcast seminar right now, because we really feel like there is a space for voices who are doing education different. And right now, in light of Corona and everything in the world being especially really turned on its head, we thought it's now more than ever an important time to start saying education can be done differently. Life is education is really our philosophy. I'll back up a second and just say that we are home educators. We are in Las Vegas, Nevada currently. We were in the United States military for many years, and so we've bounced around many different locations, many different states. We've lived overseas, and I've always home educated my kids, and we've always done it with this very vibrant community of other home educators. And the richness and diversity of what our children have been able to enjoy in their education is really reaping dividends now when I see them, let's say, up against many of their peers who've gone through the government education system. And it's not that their peers are not educated and read and write and have the facts. There's a different depth of thinking that happens when you do education in community, when you do it through travel, when you're introducing just bigger ideas into the dialectic and giving these young minds the opportunity to really chew on things that they're not being spoon-fed through a textbook. And so the there's a huge divergence. It's very small when they're young, but as you grow up through a different system, you see significant differences as they are older. Specifically, well, anyways, it's the way that their minds are working and thinking about the world. And so one of our aims is to try to connect with other families, other educators, people who are thinking along these lines and who have ideas. I feel like also, at least in the United States right now, with university applications, SATs, APs, all these tests have all been thrown out now because of coronavirus. The students can't take these exams. And really the dialogue happening behind all that is, why are these exams the gatekeeper to education anyways? I understand that it's the most affordable way for any institution to vet their students. It's a number, and so they can simply set the standard and say, okay, you don't meet the number, you're not coming to my institution. As a home educator, you know, I'm working with some other home educators to try to figure out, what can we present to universities, colleges? How do we present our student in a way that actually represents our student and what their abilities are, the way that their mind thinks, their academic skills? In a sense, I'm thinking of kind of a portfolio project. And most portfolio has generally been thought of in terms of the arts, whether it's a visual arts or musical arts or theater or something. But I feel like academic portfolio is a hugely valuable thing that could be put forward as a new conversation piece in the marketplace to say, hey, take a look at my student's writing, or look at these labs that he's been doing. What are some entrepreneurial projects that they're working on? How have they lived life differently? Because that brings a lot of value to a student if they have lived and traveled overseas. I'm very enamored with this concept of world schooling that is happening now. Borders are closed, and so we're kind of staying in the place where we are momentarily, but there's tremendous value in cross-cultural education, and these are things that just cannot be done through a textbook in a wooden seat in a classroom. So really what we're striving for is, how can we prove to the world that our children are highly educated and very, intelligent thinkers, and produce these things when perhaps we haven't checked all the traditional boxes, because the boxes themselves don't necessarily dictate. They don't dictate. Yeah, true performance. Sorry, yeah, and I just did all the talking.
That's all right. I'll take 2 minutes or less. Just to add on to that, since we were in the military, it was just convenient for us, and we were very fortunate to be able to, homeschool and have these other scenarios. The biggest thing for me is I have always been a student. Every 4 years in my military career, I was doing something new, to include being a pilot, and that's continued for me instructing other pilots to date. So the big thing was, I would rather spend the money I would spend for my kids for PSAT and SAT and buy them podcasting equipment, for example, and I would rather them not have to worry about the testing and the grade, and show something and be able to share with their peers. And Angel, I just want to say that's really amazing that you've started that podcast overseas, and I look forward to listening to it and giving some feedback. But I think that connecting kids through things like what we're doing right now is also a good thing. So those who are less fortunate, have to live in a geographic location, the world is still opened up to them through interviewing other kids, for example, kids interviewing other parents or university professors who are wherever geographic location they are, and just being able to share these things. So that's kind of where we're coming from. It's not necessarily saying outside of the box, just to say there is no box. I say there is no box in education, and we are very lucky to also be learning this alongside our children. So it's just about taking this and saying, hey, again, it's not the system, like you were talking about, not so much the system shakeup. It's just to say there's these other options, and we are just as credible. And that's where we'll end it for now.
So if, thank you so much to both of you. And it's Rachel and, I'm sorry, I didn't get the other.
Ernesto?
Ernesto, thank you. Okay, so
if I may, I just wanted to add something real quick. It's just so interesting in what you mentioned, Ernesto. You're pretty much saying giving our kids the tools to create and learning whatever that's within them, the passion or whatever. I don't want to say achieve in life, because we are in constant transformation and we always want to, without even noticing, we're just switching from one thing to another, right? Like right now I have my mindset on the podcast thing, but maybe after this conversation, I'm pretty sure it's going to be shaped into another thing probably, right? And the other thing I wanted to talk about is it clicked in me about how do you measure, right? What's the good or the bad? How do you find that measurement, whether a kid out of school or university is better or not as another kid? And I don't want to talk about the comparison strictly, but how do you measure? It's so interesting, the portfolio idea. It is, because it's about showing its importance, but not in a measurement way, right? I don't know if I'm getting across, but I was in awe.
That's exactly what how do you measure? Yes, you nailed it.
Yeah, when they're little kids, by the way, they bring home their artwork and you put on your refrigerator, right? And then when they're older kids, it's just about the grades, and that's frustrating. I'd rather see the work continue and put that up in my refrigerator and show everybody and give this to people you're collaborating with. So totally agree with that.
Yeah, it was amazing. Thank you.
I just want to say the question is also, why do we measure? Because, what's the purpose? You say Maria about not comparing who's doing better or worse, and that's the whole thing.
We've been taught that way because of a system that rates us, right?
Yeah. So I'll stop.
You don't have to stop. So these are good questions that I want to round back to, and I do want to make sure we do get to hear a little bit from the people who were here before, but I also notice, and I'm sure that they may see these connections, but like I wrote down that, Louise kind of maybe speaking more to Angel's points, because I know that's a sort of shared perspective. The aspect of the Howards, I think Sophie could tell you how her daughter made it into NYU after she took ownership of her education. So we'd love to hear a little bit of her kind of speaking directly to how that looked. And I know that Cassandra, does nature-based early childhood. And I don't know how old Maria's son is. If you could tell me how old he is. And 4. Okay. So I think that might be a good sort of trying to speak directly to what came out of those people, or just pick up the dialogue there. And then the only reason why I'm trying to facilitate this a little bit more is just because, like, you'll know that when people talk over each other, it does get harder to edit audio. So I hope everybody's okay with feeling what it's like to just speak, knowing that there's a bunch of people there, and giving people the space to you're not taking too long, and reassure your guests that they don't take too long. They have a story to tell and you want them to tell it, and you will make them sound good at the end. And that's what we're doing here too. So no apologies needed on taking too long. And okay. So since we were on the Howards last, I think maybe it might be good to go to Sophie on that topic, since Steve even chimed in a little bit on that topic too. That's okay.
I thought you were unmuting us. Hi.
I could do that next.
Wow, it's so many. So one of the pieces for me is my child is 25, so I'm out. Not that I possibly was ever in. Jokingly, I used to say the best way to educate your children is get the fuck out of the way. So I'm not in the mindset anymore. I'm doing other things. They live in New York. They refer to themselves as they. They're non-binary. They're exploring. That's one of the things that's most fascinating to me, is how not being told what cannot be done therefore everything is available and everything is possible and everything is explorable. And as Steve commented on, this idea of measuring, we are measured in life, salaries and the way we look and the way we whatever, but that is, we can get out of it. We don't have to participate. We can, maybe it's a mass number, at some point there'll be enough of us that are doing whatever feels good, whatever feels right, whatever, which I think, given the choice, we all tend to go towards acceptance and inclusion. And if I'm doing what I want, I don't need you to do what I do. You do what you do, I do what I do, and somehow we connect. And that's how, so my child is 25. They unschooled when they were 14. It was based on a conversation I had with Sir Ken Robinson, which I'm hoping all of you are familiar with. I'm recognizing the grouping in what Angel was saying, and the grouping by age is the least interesting way to group people. Like in this room right now, we're all different ages and we're interested in one topic. That's what gathered us, not the fact that we were born the same month. So I think at some point this group will need to shape a little bit, because we can't have 5, 6, 7 new people that everybody kind of summarizes the whole thing. So we'll have to be efficient, I think, at some point. But for now, I think it's wonderful that we're all just throwing and chiming in. So mine, when they were 18 and their friends were starting to decide where to go to college, decided to go to NYU in the spirit, and very much knew it was NYU, never stepped foot in New York, knew they wanted to be there. That's the other thing that's beautiful. By giving them their own voice, they have intuition. And like the whole concept of, I'm not cold, but put a sweater. It's like, well, I'm not cold, but put a sweater. It's like, I'm not cold. Well, I'm not hungry, or I'm not, So when they decided to go, they did the research on their own, came back to me with like, this is what it could look like. This is how I'm planning on financing it. This is the piece I'd like you to help me with. And off they went and wrote. So it wasn't so much a portfolio, because it was 10 years ago. So there wasn't as much access to all these tools that would make it so easy now to think along those lines. But they wrote an essay, which got them in first round and got them into a program at NYU that's called Gallatin, which is the founder of NYU, for those who don't know. And Gallatin is education into your own hands. You write your own curriculum. You don't have to study any core classes. You literally, and they sent us this curriculum, which was, I want to go back to school. I mean, every class was where design meets tech, and where, the soul has to do with integrating into life. I mean, it's just the most interesting and bizarre. And because the classes are created by the desire of the students, and the teachers, find a way to help them study what they want to study. So lots around that. I do think that we have to play with the law a little bit. Like there was something for me that was important in not feeling like I had to hide what I was doing, and not feel like they had to hide what they were doing towards their friends and their peers. So there's something there. There's also something to, they will reintegrate the world at some point. And so but teaching them how to learn, I think, is the key, because then they'll learn whatever, in the world we're in right now, I don't know the percentage exactly, but there's somewhere along the 40% of the jobs, we don't even know what they're going to be when the 4-year-olds, Maria, your kid literally will be in a world we literally do not know what that looks like whatsoever. So to learn some specific skill is kind of a completely unhelpful thing, as opposed to giving them the confidence and giving them the strength and the trust that they can go out and figure out, like the notion of figurability. That's the resource I think we're gonna need. That's, if anything I suffer from in life today, it's a sense of like, fuck, I'm in my 50s and it's harder for me to learn a new software. But then I get into a podcast class and it's like, okay, where do I click? And then learn how to do that, and learn that I can be completely incompetent, and that's okay. And that's, I think, the skill that they lose in school, because the competency is what's measured. And when you don't know something, you don't have competency. That's the point. And sadly, the red marks at the top, I was raised in France, for those of you who know the system more in Europe, it's like, it's all about the red across the page, telling you where you're wrong at all times. I remember once I wrote an essay on something and I wrote it in red, because why not? And I got a 20, which is the most you can get in France, but I got a 0 because it was written in French, in red. And the teacher literally handed it to me, like apologizing that it was brilliant, but out of the box, and she didn't know where to put me. And so my grades were 20s or zeros. I cared or I didn't care. So I guess I was an unschooled child from the beginning. That's my thoughts. I mean, I have a million things to say to all you said, and hopefully we'll continue these conversations, but back the floor.
Well, I will say that, Sophie, if you don't mind, do you see something that we could change in this structure at this moment that you think would work better? Because
I liked your idea of pairing, maybe. I mean, maybe the introduction could be done before, like we could all write, we can have a standing thing where we all say what we are. And so as people join, we just read what that is and we don't start, we just kind of share what the conversation is. I think people that are in this room should have watched the previous, so we really don't spend too much time. There's a commitment there, so we kind of pick up where we leave off, not kind of start from the beginning every time. I do think that soon I'd love to get the conversation going towards like, what can we do? Who do we know? Do we have Seth's support that we can get into law-making changes, because of the access he would have. I've worked with him on a couple projects, and that just opens, doors. And so if at some point we can present something to him that would be in the vicinity of like, this is how we think it should be done somehow. And then I have a lot of access to funding, which is often the issue behind stuff like this. So to have even, support from individuals or people that have suffered from being in school that could help, things like that to me would be cool. Like, I like your idea that it's not about bashing what is, but really inventing what could be. And I think the red tape that's being lifted right now from parents being given back okay, now they're your kids, so what do you want to do with them? And watching people completely incompetent in doing anything, and those that are, all right, let's go study salamanders on the beach, and figure out something fun to do and educative. So that would be a focus for me rapidly, is what else do we have,
Okay. Thank you for clarifying. So I will, and that was the intent, is not to go completely back into what you shared the first time, because I didn't do that. But now the Howards can know that if they do watch the first one, you're going to say stuff that actually explains that journey, or exactly. And so,
Great.
Louise, if you could just, while you showed up here again, and I know Louise has put out a new thread, so there could be spin-offs out of this too, because what I hear in Sophie is that interest in saying, like, let's really talk about creating something. Not everybody here, like, I don't know if Maria's down with, like, because she seems like she's at a spot where I need to make a decision for my own kid first, whereas Steve, who's been doing this and is locked up in India, might be like, I'm all down for trying to create something with you, and I'm not speaking for them, but we all are coming from a different place. So this first thing is, but I do think spinoffs are necessary. So thank you, Sophie. Louise. I will unmute you. Sorry. I did it again. And there's just a delay. There we go.
Can you hear me now? Cool.
Yes.
I'm here because I found the first time we met up amazing. And there've just been so many conversations that have happened in the week since we had this last conversation, and I just find it really incredible. So just for those of you who don't know me, I come from education in Germany. I'm a Brit who lives in Germany and have worked in education now for 25 years. I'm working in the field of teaching English, and I'm really excited and trying to make English learning more exciting for students, because, hey, the one thing is that I find really exciting about learning English is that students are generally quite keen because they can see the sense behind it. They know that it's going to help them. I mean, they go out there and they're all watching YouTube anyway. A lot of them watching it in English because there's a reason, because they want to know what some people out there are saying who are specialists. So this is a good premise. But I want to, from all the things we've been talking about, there's so much more that needs to be done to even make mainstream education more attractive, to give more openness to students. And I think this is one of the things that has opened my eyes over the past few months. This idea of parents taking over to a certain extent, then learning to let go and not try and continue with curriculum, but to do other things with their kids when they're trying to pick up a little bit of where the schools haven't been able to help the students over the past few months. And one of the ideas that I found really exciting was this idea of free Fridays, where for those who are even in a school setting, you might have this idea of on a Friday, the teachers and the students together. Although having seen your video, Nicole, the one you sent today, I'm thinking why even have the teachers? Because the kids seem to do it just beautifully on their own. Can you maybe post that video just for those who haven't seen it, because it's just here because it's brilliant. And I just really like this idea of giving back more autonomy to the kids and to the teachers, because I think, I'm going to speak up for teachers now very quickly, because I think they get a lot of bashing and they get a really bad time at times. And I think that a lot of them are doing a really good job, but there are so many constraints that are making it really difficult for them to do a good job. And I think a lot of the constraints are also caused by the parents. They are caused by the system, absolutely, but also by the parents. And I would love to try and just help people constructively work together to improve what we have, because let's face it, what we have is going to be what the masses are doing. I love the idea of, you know, people following and doing other things, but we have a status quo. And I really want to try and help those kids who are in this system to get the most out of it that's possible. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you. And so that's where I said I just put Louise's thread in here because she knew from last time that while she wants to kind of be here, is it Vanessa? Is that her name? Or did I miss it? Okay. So Vanessa.
This is Emmy.
Emmy. Okay,
This is
Vanessa.
Emmy.
Hi. How are you? I love it. So Louise, I definitely think it makes sense to kind of spin off with some people who want to talk about that sort of change from the inside, where you don't feel, because I do recognize that talking through this stuff can sound like teachers get bashed, and that's never, ever my intention.
Not this group.
No,
Sorry.
I know that. No, and I know that, but it can. I can't guard against that might happen, as much as I try and say, let's not sort of focus on. So I do think that there needs to be a sort of separate dialogue. And I appreciate that you want to take the lead on that. And so there is a link there already. And I mentioned the Independent Project, which is a school within a school, and it's run by teens. And they just had an advisor, and they use all of the school resources as kind of the way an unschooler uses all of their resources. So there's definitely a movement to try and have that become more of a norm. And so you can find lots of videos for Sam Levin is the young person who did it. His mom, Susan Engel. They wrote a book together, and you can find lots of videos. He's done TEDx talk type things and everything. So, okay.
Cool.
And then last but not least, Cassandra, and then I would like to end by basically trying to figure out, other than that one sort of tangent that Louise is always welcome back here if she wants, but like to really try and have this be a place of entry to spin people off is really what I would want. And I think what Sophie was asking for too. So, okay. Cassandra, I will unmute you. I thought I unmuted. Yes, there we go.
There you go. Hi. Yes, I'm Cassandra, and I'm right now I'm based in just north of Seattle, Washington, in the United States, and I get to integrate what everybody else shared in my own little intro, so that's nice. So I think that what I will share right now is that I was a nature-based early childhood educator. I led a program that was fully outdoors in the afternoons, a 3.5-hour daily program where I was outside with ages 3 to 6, primarily in our play garden space, but also field trips around the local area. We have beaches, we have forests, we have lots of really beautiful natural spaces around here. So we're very lucky and privileged in that way. And at the same time, nature is everywhere. So right now, what I'm grappling with is I was laid off due to the pandemic, and my program was closed. I've had several parents ask me to support them in coaching or, you know, whatever kind of name to put on it, but supporting them in this time with the pandemic. A lot of parents are now faced with the question that I think the folks in this conversation have already been grappling with long before, but a lot of parents are really just in the dark on what to do. And I've been speaking with parents who don't want their children returning to their public school setting because of health, because of safety issues, and then also just the like unsure, of you know, if they can even return to school for the normal like 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. Monday through Friday scenario. And so I really wish to act as a bridge and act as a connector and act as somebody who, like for you, Maria, for example, like just acting as a person who I'm aware of the whole spectrum. And because I love learning about the whole spectrum of education, and myself, you know, as I shared in the last conversation, I chose to not go to public high school and instead went to community college. And so in a sense, I was in that kind of self-directed education sphere. And I do really, I think that there's a need for both parents and for children of all ages. And I think this can really be done with children who are very young. Like this doesn't just have to be, you know, high school age students. I see the opportunity for there just to be so much more flexibility and adaptability with how we approach learning. And this is what, you know, folks have been sharing. And I think since I had the opportunity as a child to really play with my education, play with my learning, my parents were very, very open in that way, and I'm really grateful for that. Since I had that opportunity, and now I've, you know, kind of unintentionally decided to be in the education world, I keep being called to offer different perspectives, keep offering different ways, keep, you know, questioning if this is really how a teacher wants to do it, if this is really how a parent wants to do it, whatever role they're in, to keep reminding people that the way they're doing it, there might be a slight alternative or a radical alternative, but it might just be it might just be a 1% difference. You know, maybe it's, they don't, you know, parents are less rigid about their children getting their homework done. You know, there's parents who just decide that homework is optional for their children. And I know that I was a child who grew into a deep amount of anxiety and self-judgment. And I wonder if that had been an option for my parents, even if, you know, they were incredibly flexible, adaptable parents. But if that had been, you know, kind of dropped in their minds as like, oh, homework could be optional, and that's a parent and that's a family decision. Or maybe, you know, just like Louise is sharing about Free Fridays, there's also kind of teacher-led initiatives of Forest Fridays. And so lots of different programs in the States as well as elsewhere, but I know most about the ones in the States are starting, you know, going to a local forest for Fridays. And that's the nature-based element to their program. And it's a slight change. I personally love radical changes. That's really where I live. And at the same time, like, if we're really looking for a big shift, I think that what's really valuable is to offer lots of little different ways of doing it. And I'm one who really likes to see the big picture and see the big vision for it. And so, I just really see the benefit of offering different ways. And then also, I think the last thing I'll add is that really kind of pushing and urging people to really consider what are the ways they're not okay with shifting. What are the ways that like they're like, what do they kind of balk at? And like, what are those things? We all have those things, but like, what are you not okay with? Because that informs, I think, myself as the grown-up in the room with a room full of children, or you know, as an educator trainer, what am I uncomfortable with? What am I, you know, and maybe, for example, for this space, it's like, you know, if Nicole like kind of pushed back at what Sophie was sharing about a different kind of facilitation, it's like, oh, that, and you didn't, you know, I'm just kind of sharing an example, but like, oh, that was something I kind of like felt really uncomfortable about. And because that's where the learning is for me, is like, what are the things that make me uncomfortable? And going towards that, which is really hard to do, speaking for myself, but I think for all humans, it's hard to do the things that make us most uncomfortable. So that's where I think that I'd really like to see my role in this movement, if you will, like of offering that kind of reflective nature of like, oh, really, why is that you want to do that? Why do you want to do homework free? Or I just keep using that as an example. Or why do you want to integrate nature into your program? Why do you want to have a website like Angel, you were sharing? Like why? What's underneath that? And then kind of what's that next step? Where's your edge? I guess where's your growth edge for how you can make this even more slightly radical or something. So yeah, thanks.
Awesome. And I'm glad you brought up, because that's one of the things I was going to say to Sophie, because she was talking about this desire to kind of create something. And it sounds like, and I don't know, Sophie, if you've looked at the spectrum of what's out there, it sounds like Cassandra's looked at some things. And I know that when I first entered this space, that's what I did first. And I wound up settling on, I'm going to stand up and show my shirt here, the ALC. It's got a nice little smiley face at the bottom, as a model that I think is fantastic. So I'm going to, just like I directed Louise to the independent project, I will send you there, because you might find things you really don't like what Cassandra said, like what bothers me about this. For me, I haven't found things I don't like about the ALC. I know it attracts a lot of hippie-like people, and I'm not a hippie-like person, but that's not what it is. So I don't get turned off by things like that. You know, it attracts a lot of different people. But the aspect of, I didn't use any hand signals here, but in an ALC meeting, we would have, Sophie at one point would have went like this and been like, change up. Like, I feel like this isn't working for what I thought this meeting was going to be. And I want to suggest that we do this. And the meeting, so kids in those environments really learn how to speak up in nonverbal ways and draw the attention. And anyone has the ability to say, we need a change up because this is not working. And if I'm in the middle of talking and somebody's not understanding what I'm saying, they just put up a C to say clarifying question. And like, that's just one piece of what an ALC is. It's so much more, but it's based on facilitation. And there's a thread in the group. If nobody's seen the facilitation thread, there's some facilitation conversations happening inside of Pod 6 too. So I do know that this has to be a certain thing. And I'm going to turn to Steve to see what he wants to add and clarify. Thank you, Steve.
Just going to ask Cassandra's question from the notes. Is ALC Agile Learning Centers?
Yes. So here's what I had written: Agile Learning Centers. It is I believe it's a great solution. It is the one that I am most interested in helping advance. They are independent self-directed learning centers. It's an open source model. It's got a great community of facilitators in Slack. You know, you can join for like $95 for the year is like an organization, because I had set up a nonprofit with the intent on creating one locally. And that still is kind of part of a future vision. But I think as an individual, it's cheaper. And I could talk a lot more about ALCs, but I won't, because I want to really focus on how do we, I still want to hold space on a weekly basis to keep people being able to tell who they are and why they are interested in this topic. That is my intention. And I can say that I feel most aligned with what Cassandra is saying in terms of what she sounds like she's feeling called to do, because I am also already doing that and feeling a higher call to do the parent shift work. That's part of what I see this as. Whereas it seems like Steve has already made that shift and doesn't necessarily, so I don't know, you see what I mean? Whereas I look at like where Maria is right now, I feel like, and even Rachel and the Howards are things that I feel like most aligned to be able to support. So I want to see if we have a few more minutes, how would there be additional spin-off? Because I do think that having these personal meetings is important. It's a real conversation instead of fast and furious on the screen in your podcasting class. So popcorn is just chime in if you feel like you have something to offer on how we should go forward. I know that Louise already has put, I'm going to unmute you, Louise, because.
Maybe we unmute everyone so we can do.
Yeah, there you go. Everyone unmute, so, well, if you want to. Louise, yeah.
I put up this new thing today. Finally, I got around to it to put this new thread up about people who want to get change being done within the model we have at the moment, sort of organized schools. So I don't know, Angel, if you're interested in joining me there, and maybe other people will decide to come and try that out, and then maybe we could do something there where we're also looking at the situation within schools. I would love to be a part of this group, if I may, to lurk and to listen and to learn, because I find it really exciting and really interesting. As I say, it's not something that is viable for us in Germany yet. It's, as you said, illegal, but I'm finding it fascinating. So this is for me personal growth and learning, and there's lots I think that we can take on. You know, I was thinking even the little hand signals, these could easily be taken on into schools, and they would help kids so much more than always having to do this, which is so out there. And look, everybody, I need help.
Yeah. Yeah, this is another one that what you're saying resonates with me. So you'll see everybody in the meeting starts to really kind of put their fingers up, and you'll notice when it's resonating with everybody. And I get chills just talking about it, because I've been inside these rooms where you see these kids and they're hearing some other kid, and every adult in the room is listening to that kid and acknowledging and affirming what they're saying. And so is every child, you know? So I will definitely try and do some more on introduction to hand signals, because hand signals is something that nothing is stopping you from doing hand signals in any education space. All right. Anybody else?
If I can
Yeah, Sophie here. I'm wondering if there's something to those who have kids that are in the midst of figuring out what they want to do, those who don't have kids at all and are interested in contributing something to move the needle for everyone, and those who have had kids that have done it and have a little bit of knowledge that can be shared. I wonder if there's three kind of branches. It doesn't mean we don't get together, because I think there's lots of learning that I think Maria could get from, you know, Louise's experience or mine or Nicole's. And so maybe there's like a monthly something, but then the weeklies are more, like, I know I'm not interested at all in working with the kids right now, but I'm super interested in seeing how I can contribute to the parents' education. Really interests me. I think 90% of the conversation I had when they unschooled themselves was the fear that people had of what that meant to get out of the system, and could they do it? Like, it was more about supporting them than anything else if they decided to do it. And so somehow to build some sort of school for parents interests me, or some sort of curriculum where parents could learn. I mean, we study everything else. Like, why are we not studying the most important thing on the freaking planet, which is be a parent or be an educator or raise those incredible souls? So yeah, I'm kind of liking that, if that contributes, Nicole, to anything.
Yes, that is, I think, in line with, I saw Cassandra's head going, because that definitely is in line with what we're saying, is that, and I mentioned last time that there's a process that goes where you have to go through deschooling. And I would say that Steve never really, I mean, if he had been schooled when he started reading the Continuum Concept, deschooling really has happened then, luckily, at the time of the birth of his first child instead of afterwards. And so, yeah. Anybody else? So I will say the other thing about an ALC is that what we're moving into now is kind of a offerings. We're suggesting offerings, and they don't have to all be disclosed now. I will give us time to incubate on this, but I am saying I'm going to hold space every Thursday to have these kinds of conversations. The first initial place where Maria and the Howards, and last week where and Steve and all of Angel, everybody gets to share their first, why they're interested in this, and be able to point them if there are other offerings that might be of more interest. So if, you know, the way this became about was because Louise made a post in the mastermind group, Sophie chimed in and said, let's get a Zoom together. And then I was like, okay, yes, because I knew this was definitely completely what I want to be doing. And now I encourage any one of us to kind of make a similar offering, invite each other into it if it is around, because I told Louise, like, I would be happy to co-facilitate or be a fly on the wall in her educator one, because I do have a lot of experience inside of traditional education spaces and have a lot of knowledge on how they can be shifted, you know? And so maybe introducing hand signals might be more appropriate to do there. And I can take that video clip and share it widely if I want. You see what I mean? Anybody else? Because I know I want to keep it to about an hour, and we're over an hour. So you have to go, Cassandra? Dogs are...
You know, I moved outside and now he's calmer, but yes, my dog is ready to move on with the day. But what I'd like to just share is, I mean, first of all, I like having some, you know, reflection time after conversations like this to really determine where my desires and needs lie. But Sophie, what you were speaking to about, you know, a parent learning space, I think is really, I'm in for that. I think that, and as a not yet parent who's fascinated about families and really wants to offer and support. And I think that I really see the benefit of having a sort of kinship model to helping our children, where there's many different roles that one can take. And I think the more different types of roles, whether they be grandparents, parents, aunts, uncles, teachers, really the better, and the more informed everybody is, the better. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from with my desire to be kind of in the role of educator, but offering a really informed perspective. So I think that to just say like next times or kind of where I want to go, I really want to learn myself, to teach myself through conversations like this, really where I'm most needed, I guess. And so being a fly on the wall, even, it's just helps inform me, because I learn best through conversation. I learn best through interpersonal, so interpersonally and intrapersonally, considering and, you know, self-reflecting. So this is a magic learning opportunity for me, whether I'm speaking or not. And so that's all I have right now. So thank you.
I have to go, my loves.
Okay, can you I will send you the chat, or you can all save the chat if you want. 3 dots in the bottom right corner. I just typed in something that, Sophie, that you might want to look at, just because what you're talking about and what Cassandra's just talking about, it is something I've given some thought to, and another sort of a side offering from this Thursday thing, though. Okay, thank you. All right, bye, Sophie.
Bye.
Anybody
Bye,
else that needs to drop off, if you want to say goodbye, if anybody else wants to stay.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Thank you so much.
Please. Bye, Angel.
I do too. Bye. Thank you so much for this
Bye, Maria.
opportunity. I'm coming back next week. I am.
Okay. See you then.
Bye-bye.
Alrighty. Same link,
Bye.
same place. Okay.
Bye.
Anybody else? Anybody needs to stick around and wants to chat? How are the Howards doing down there? Haven't heard from them in a while.
No, we're doing good. We were, our fingers were moving the little agree thing.
Can't see it.
The whole time with everybody. It's kind of interesting to me. I think there's definitely distinctive lanes that I've heard. And fortunately for me, I always want to do all of them. But I would say this, to Sophie's point, my mother and Luis too, where I saw the bridge was that I went to public school. And then at one point I transitioned to a private Catholic all boys school. But always the consistent part was that my mother was hyper involved with my education, no matter what I was in, whether it's after school program, whatever. So I consider myself to be homeschooled in the sense that my mom filled in the gaps. She still did do, took me to jazz festivals. We did a lot of things together, whether it was going to $1 movie nights and just breaking apart the production values of the movie and all this other stuff. So I think what's nice about nowadays, as of a couple months ago, parents have had to look at what am I doing at home to further my child's education. And so I think there is a happy conversation that can happen with all of it. I heard that there's intrapreneurs and entrepreneurs, right? So intrapreneurs are people who make the change within a company, and the entrepreneurs are the ones who are outside of that. And I think that's kind of what we have here. We have people inside who are trying to change things up, and then we have others who are outside of it, who are more the self-directed homeschool type. Not everybody's privileged enough to be able to fully do homeschool. And I think that the whole point is this is a great liaison group as I see it. Lessons learned from each of these lanes should cross-pollinate for sure, because I think there are too many barriers between those things. And I think now that people have seen what they can do at home, yes, kids will go back to school, but I think they'll get a taste of what you can do in between. And that's all.
Yep. And I would say, just to jump in, as far as picking a lane, we find ourselves, obviously we've not been in the system. So we've never been in the system. We live outside of the system. So it's certainly never, maybe bash the system a little bit, never the teachers, because they are handcuffed. But ours really has been about doing it completely differently at home. And I think it was Steve who said, why are we measuring? How do we measure?
And who measures? Who measures?
And let's erase the measurement and say, here's my student. This is what we've created. And so, yeah, I like where Sophie was going with the parent education. I like what Cassandra said. We have to do our homework and go back and listen, because we jumped in here late. So I apologize. I'm not naming everybody. But the idea of being that liaison to the parents to say, you don't have to do it the way the system says you have to do it. There's infinite opportunities. So it's certainly speaking to the parents in that light. The reason we've decided to bring our children into the podcast endeavor is not so much, it is partly to just give them experience and a voice and to connect them with others. We don't want it to end up being a complete, we know we have to be sensitive to audience. So we don't want to throw our kids on there and have the adult audience disappear, and we don't want to speak over the children, and we don't have any younger listeners. But I feel like their voice in this in particular is to confirm what we are saying as adults. And it's kind of a scary thing to say, I'm going to use my children as an example. of, hey, it's working for me. You know, I am articulate. I've done these things. We're certainly not perfect, but as an encouragement to other families that says, hey, we're in the trenches, we're doing it now, and it's working. And we're willing to put ourselves out there sort of as an example, but to engage in the dialogue with other parents, teachers, educators who are also doing it is invaluable. And who possibly have students at home they're also working with. So we tend to fall into the high school age realm, but I find there's tremendous value in learning from those who've gone before and done it successfully. And then you also want to be in a position to turn to those who are coming up behind you and say, okay, you know, you're doing really great, you know, with your younger child, and give them some vision moving forward. So I do see us in.
Yeah. And no firewall between people who are in school and homeschool kids.
No, definitely not.
No firewall.
Definitely not.
There needs to be cross-pollination.
Yeah.
And that's where we're coming from on that one.
Yeah. And I will say, I'm going to put it in the thread here or in the chat here, but also I just tagged your family in another thread, which was called Amplifying Youth Voice, because I do know that I did, when I was in Pod 5, my focus was on interviewing aspiring youth entrepreneurs. So I interviewed a fellow Pod 5 member who was 16 years old, and he was starting his own podcast interviewing entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs. So it was really kind of meta, but he actually, and you realize there's definitely difference in, I think, in creating the space for that and the comfort level for the host and as the parent host. So if you wanted to ever talk about that, I'd try and see if I could, you know, just tag me and stuff that I might add, because I think what your vision for that is awesome. And yet I also think that if your boys get more interested in it, there's that particular young person, his podcast is called 21st Century Visionary, and his name is Sanat Sinkel. I'll put that in just because me and him are working together to try and introduce podcasting as a learning medium to more young people, that they can create their own podcasts. And that's what he wants to help young people do, and he's already doing. So I don't have the link handy, but I'm sure you can find it if you search that.
Yeah, I've
and
actually
I think,
stumbled on the thread. So yeah,
our fingers are twinkling.
Yeah, and the 21st Century Vision, like I said, it's just interesting to see what he's learning through his interviews with them. And for me, it's so amazing to just watch how he keeps evolving over just the last few months since we met. So it's your journey up ahead is going to be even more exciting than what you've endeavored to so far, I think.
Thank you.
So what, again, are you Steve? You want me to unmute you? Yeah, sorry.
No, I've done it. I misplaced the mute button. I just wanted to say I think I'm very much coming from the same place as timely flush. I'm coming from the same place as Rachel and Ernesto, in that I think any value that, you know, because we sit outside the system too. My kids are only 7 and 5, Howard's. So we're some way behind you guys, but you know, we can kind of be an advocate for the kids and stand up for the, you know, the fact that they're learning all the time, and that if you don't stop the sponge by regulating it too much, the sponge continues to work. And I think, you know, the things that Sophie was saying last week were, you know, completely inspirational about her child's journey. It says I'm unstable. Can you hear me? I can still hear me.
Mm-hmm. I hear you.
And that's one of the great things, because I think when you're home educating, and I think it's probably the same for all parents, they worry about how their kids are going to turn out and what's going to happen down the line. And that's the same whether your kids go to school or not. But if your kids aren't going to school, and you're not fixated on measurement, then you have this kind of, it's always really, really lovely to hear a story from someone like Sophie, who says, my child said they wanted to go to NYU, and I said, oh well, and they said, well, I've already rung them up, and here's what they say.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then they went. So yeah, it's lovely to hear. It's lovely to hear from people who are doing it further down the line.
Yeah, awesome. And then even to add on to that, Steve, with the concept for the Howards, just to try and really challenge yourself on the measurement, is that even before this move of COVID and colleges letting go of the SAT, there has been, especially for in the self-directed education, because it sounds like you were in more of a, I don't want to say traditional homeschooling, but like in the spaces of like, if you're not already like connected to the Alliance for Self-Directed Education or the Alternative Education Resource Organization, and those sort of spaces, the conversation has been that the students that really embrace unschooling, like Sophie's daughter, that it is very easy for them to get into these schools if they really just threw themselves into it, because they weren't focused on the measurement along the way. Like Sophie described, she would go to work and be like, their daughter's like, oh, that's what I'm going to do today. And she'd come home and her daughter was doing it. And she was doing it more alone, it sounded like. Whereas I think there's a whole way to do it much more in community, but because they can't go through, they don't have all of the same GPAs and all those metrics, the colleges cannot force them through that standard evaluation process, but they still have to evaluate them. So they have to get human eyes on them. And just that right there, because they aren't, if is like, it gets them in. So yeah, so that would be my last bit of encouragement on that matter, I guess, for now. So unless you want to keep going, because I can encourage you more on that matter. Teens has been my area of focus.
I think we're okay on encouragement at the moment.
Good. All right. So
so thank you.
You're welcome. I'm going to stop the recording now, and I'll stick around for any private questions if people have, but till next time.